There's a difference between a town that's spooky and a town that's wrong. Spooky is a Halloween decoration, a ghost tour, a bed and breakfast with a tragic backstory and decent scones. Wrong is something else. Wrong is when you arrive in a place and something in the oldest part of your brain, the part that kept your ancestors alive on the savannah, quietly suggests that you should not be here, that the air is off, that the locals are looking at you in a way that's hard to describe but easy to feel. Every town on this list has locals who warn visitors not to come, not for liability reasons, not as a marketing gimmick, because something happened here, something geological, historical, psychological, or entirely inexplicable. That changed the fundamental character of the place. Some of these towns are dying. Or some have already died and didn't get the memo. And number one has been literally on fire for over 6 decades and still has residents who refuse to leave. Hit that like button if you think you can make it to number 1 without sleeping with the lights on. And subscribe because trust me, by entry 3, you're going to want someone else in the room. Number 10, Cairo, Illinois. Population, approximately 1,700, down from 15,000 in 1920. Cairo, Illinois is pronounced K-Ro, not like Egypt, a distinction that matters less and less as the city increasingly resembles something ancient and abandoned. It sits at the very southern tip of Illinois, at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, in a position that made it genuinely strategic in the Civil War era. Cairo once processed more freight than Chicago. It had opera houses, grand hotels, a commercial district that believed absolutely in its own future. Then the railroads changed routes, the river traffic declined, the manufacturing collapsed. The white flight after the civil rights era tore what remained into pieces. Yeah, and Cairo became something that economists call a shrinking city, and that anyone who visits calls something considerably more visceral. Walk through downtown Cairo today, and the buildings are still standing. That's the thing. It's not rubble. It's perfectly preserved collapse. Victorian storefronts with the windows boarded and the facades crumbling in place. A former hotel with trees growing from the upper floors. Streets so empty that your footsteps echo. The population has dropped more than 88% from its peak. The school district merged, the hospital closed, the grocery store closed. Cairo's racial history is not ancient or abstract. In 1967, local NAACP leader and Army veteran Robert Hunt was found hanged in his jail cell, officially ruled suicide, widely disbelieved by the black community, and triggering a black economic boycott of white businesses that lasted years and accelerated the city's spiral. Riots, snipers, National Guard, a city that tore itself apart and never quite recovered. Local Facebook groups for Cairo oscillate between defiant civic pride and posts that read like dispatches from a war zone. Another fire on 9th Street, more break-ins on Commercial. Does anyone know if the pharmacy is open today? The Ohio and Mississippi rivers still meet here, still enormous, still magnificent, still completely indifferent to what happened between them. Nature has opinions about Cairo. It floods, repeatedly, destructively, as if the rivers are making an argument that Cairo chose not to hear. Locals who've stayed, and some have, fiercely, will tell you this place has a soul that the statistics can't measure. They're probably right. They're also probably the only ones left who know what that soul sounds like. Number 9, Dudleytown, Connecticut. Population 0, and it's going to stay that way. In 1748, a family named Dudley settled in the hills of Cornwall Township, Connecticut, in an area that would come to carry their name and an inventory of misfortunes so consistent it stopped looking like coincidence about 150 years ago. The Dudleytown settlement failed. The farms were unproductive, the soil shallow, the forest dark and close. Residents reported unusual madness among the community, multiple families afflicted with what the 18th century called melancholy, and what we might recognize as psychological collapse. People fled. Those who stayed often came to spectacularly bad ends, documented in historical records that read less like town history and more like a recurring nightmare. By the early 20th century, Dudleytown was abandoned. The Dark Entry Forest Association, a private land trust, bought the property and has since maintained a strict no visitors policy. No trespassing, no tours, no exceptions. The Forest Association doesn't market the mystique. They don't sell tickets. They actively, earnestly want people to stay away, which in the internet age is either the most effective reverse psychology imaginable or a genuinely sincere warning from people who know something. Parapsychologists have noted that Dudleytown sits in a natural depression in the hills that block sunlight for extended periods, and supposedly disrupts electromagnetic fields in ways that affect human psychology. Skeptics note that the rocky soil genuinely was agriculturally terrible, and the settlers were just poor farmers who got unlucky. Both explanations are probably true, and neither one makes the place feel less wrong. People try to sneak into Dudleytown regularly. Most get turned around in the woods before they find anything. Some report standard hiking in the dark forest anxiety, dressed up in retrospect as supernatural experience. A few come back with stories that are harder to dismiss, told quietly, with the specific body language of someone who isn't sure they'd believe themselves either. The Dark Entry Forest Association just keeps the gates locked. They don't argue. They don't explain. They just say, "Don't come here." And the forest closes around the silence like a hand. Number 8. Burkittsville, Maryland. Population, approximately 151. In 1999, a low-budget horror film called The Blair Witch Project was released, claiming to be found footage of 3 student filmmakers who disappeared in the woods near Burkittsville, Maryland, while researching a local legend. It made $248 million worldwide on a budget of approximately $60,000, traumatized a generation of campers, and permanently altered the lives of 151 people who had nothing to do with any of it. Burkittsville, a genuinely historic little Civil War town in the South Mountain region, found itself suddenly, irrevocably famous as the town from the Blair Witch movie. Tourists came immediately and in numbers that bore no relationship to the capacity of a village with one stop sign. They pulled up grave markers in the church cemetery as souvenirs. They said they knocked on residents' doors asking where the woods were. They drove the main street at 3 a.m. with their headlights off. They stole the town sign so many times that authorities eventually stopped replacing it. "We're not a theme park," one longtime resident told a reporter in a 2019 interview. "People treat this like it belongs to them because they saw a movie. This is where we live." Here's the darkly funny part. The Blair Witch legend itself is fictional, invented entirely by the filmmakers. There is no historical witch. But Burkittsville's actual history is legitimately grim. It was the site of the Battle of South Mountain in 1862, a brutal Civil War engagement that left the surrounding fields and forests soaked in blood before Antietam, 3 days later, soaked them again. The churches served as field hospitals. The cemetery received the overflow. The woods around Burkittsville, Seneca Creek State Park, and the South Mountain State Forest are genuinely old, dense, and disorienting in the dark. Not because of any witch, because they're thick second-growth forest where the trails cross and double back, where fog settles in the hollows, where the trees are close enough together that your flashlight beam stops meaningfully about 15 feet ahead of you. The Blair Witch isn't real. South Mountain is. And somehow, one of them is creepier than the other. Number 7. Skidmore, Missouri. Population, approximately 250. On July 10th, 1981, in the town square of Skidmore, Missouri, a man named Ken Rex McElroy was shot to death in broad daylight in front of between 30 and 46 witnesses. He was hit multiple times by at least 2 different firearms. Nobody saw anything. Not one of the 30 to 46 witnesses saw a single thing. No one was ever charged. No one was ever arrested. The case remains officially unsolved. McElroy had terrorized Skidmore for years, decades by some accounts. He'd been accused of assault, rape, theft, and child molestation. He'd been tried 21 times and convicted once, with the conviction under appeal when he died. The day before the shooting, he'd walked into a local grocery store and threatened the elderly owner with a rifle. The townspeople met the next morning. McElroy showed up at the local bar. The rest happened in the square, in front of everyone, in daylight. The silence that followed was not born of fear. It was something more deliberate and more unsettling. A collective decision by an entire community to look at the law, look at what the law had failed to do, and look away from a dead man lying in the street. Rural Missouri decided, as one organism, that some things get handled locally. Skidmore has never fully escaped the story. True crime podcasters and documentary filmmakers arrive periodically. Longtime residents have nothing to say and mean it comprehensively. The town's population has dwindled, farms consolidated, the young left, the economy thinned out. Now what remains is a quiet little place in Nottoway County where the soybean fields run flat to the horizon, and the old-timers will look directly through you if you ask the wrong question. The square is still there. Nothing marks what happened. Skidmore's local knowledge includes knowing which subjects don't get discussed and which questions answer themselves with silence. Number 6, Helltown, Ohio. Population 0 officially. Unofficially debated. In the 1970s, the federal government bought up a large swath of land in Summit County, Ohio, near the town of Boston Township, to create the Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area. The buyout displaced hundreds of families, forced them off land some had held for generations, and left behind a collection of empty houses, abandoned farms, and the desolate infrastructure of a community that vanished overnight by government decree. Then the internet got hold of it and named it Helltown. The legends accreted fast, thick, and with the specific creative energy of teenagers with cars and nothing to do on a Saturday night in suburban Ohio. The abandoned church at the end of Stanford Road, whose sign read Boston Church, was recontextualized as a satanic temple. The cemetery behind it, obviously ancient and legitimately eerie in the fog, became a site of ritual activity. A nearby one-lane road with an abrupt end, actually a flood control barrier, became the end of the world. The old bus decaying in the woods acquired a backstory involving a mass murder that never occurred, the mutant animals, the chemical spill, the government cover-up, all invented, all persistent, all completely alive in local teenage mythology from the 1980s onward. Here's the thing that makes Helltown genuinely unnerving beneath the mythology. The buyout area really does feel wrong. Houses that still stand, roofs caving, windows empty, nature reclaiming the floors, sit behind National Park Service fences. The church is real and genuinely unsettling to encounter on a foggy night, even when you know the truth about it. The trees of the Cuyahoga Valley close in densely. Stanford Road really does dead end at a barrier with a sign that says, "In government speak that you shouldn't be here." The National Park Service now manages the land and posts regular reminders that trespassing is illegal. The reminders do not appear to be highly effective. The myths keep circulating, the abandoned structures keep standing, and something about a place that was emptied by government order, all those lives, all those roots vacuumed out, leaves a texture that no amount of rational explanation quite smooths away. Number 5, Casadaga, Florida. Population, approximately 115. Casadaga, Florida, bills itself as the psychic capital of the world, and this is not a casual claim. It is a registered historic district. It has been a spiritualist community continuously since 1894, the same year the Methodist camp meeting circuit was birthing Bible retreats across the South. George Colby, a medium from New York, was planting stakes in the orange grove swampland of central Florida, guided, he said, by his spirit guide Seneca, who instructed him to found a community for spiritual development here. 130 years later, the Casadaga Spiritualist Camp is still operating. The 115 or so residents of the camp, certified mediums, healers, and affiliated community members, still offer readings, still conduct Sunday services in the Andrew Jackson Davis building, still walk the grounds that George Colby staked out by spirit instruction in 1894. What is it actually like? Casadaga is a tiny, Spanish moss-draped hamlet of Victorian cottages and wooden signs advertising services, readings by appointment, spiritual counseling, aura photography. It smells of incense and Florida humidity, and the particular vegetable sweetness of old wood in a subtropical climate. The residents are largely older, largely warm, and largely unbothered by the busloads of tourists who arrive from Orlando, 45 minutes south, looking for something between entertainment and genuine encounter. The genuinely unnerving part is this: skeptics come in waves. They come with rationalist frameworks and their arms metaphorically crossed, ready to catch fakery, or ready to explain the cold reading techniques, ready to drive home satisfied and superior. And a meaningful percentage of them come back quieter than they left, having been told something that the medium in question could not, by any normal mechanism, have known. Is it real? That's the wrong question, and Casadaga knows it. The right question is why this particular patch of Florida swampland has been pulling people into questions they weren't planning to ask since 1894. The locals don't warn you not to visit. They warn you to be specific about what you're asking for. The universe, they say, is very literal. Number 4, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Population, approximately 4,000. On November 15, 1966, two couples driving near an abandoned TNT plant outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia, reported seeing a creature, large, gray, man-shaped, with massive wings folded at its back and eyes that glowed red in the headlights, that rose into the air and chased their car at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour before they reached the town limits. Within weeks, dozens of other residents had reported similar encounters. The national press gave it a name, the Mothman. 13 months later, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge, a suspension bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed during rush hour. 46 people died. It remains one of the worst bridge disasters in American history. The Mothman sightings stopped. The connection between the creature and the bridge collapse is rationally zero. Emotionally and narratively, it is total. Point Pleasant has leaned into the mythology with the particular pragmatism of a small Appalachian river town that understands what it has. There is a Mothman museum. There is a 12-foot stainless steel Mothman statue that has become genuinely iconic. Red LED eyes, wings spread, abs that the sculptor perhaps felt the cryptid deserved. There's an annual Mothman festival that draws tens of thousands of people. The tourism economy depends in part on the continued existence of a flying humanoid that may or may not have warned the town about a bridge collapse. But here's what the mythology sometimes obscures. Point Pleasant is also a real town carrying real grief. If 46 people went onto that bridge on a December evening during Christmas shopping season and didn't come home, the river took them. The town rebuilt. The Appalachian economy did to Point Pleasant what it did to many of these towns. Compressed it, thinned it, left the bones showing. When locals talk about the Mothman, they're not always talking about a monster. Sometimes they're talking about the sense, still alive, still persistent, that the bridge was going to fall before it fell, and that something in the landscape knew it first. Number 3, Peacher, Oklahoma. Population, approximately 1, as of 2016. Peacher, Oklahoma is not metaphorically a toxic wasteland. It is a literal, federally designated, Superfund-listed toxic wasteland, where the soil, groundwater, and air were contaminated by a century of lead and zinc mining that ended in the 1970s and left 70 million tons of chat, crushed mining waste, loaded with lead, piled in mountains across the landscape. The chat piles rise 50 feet high in some places. Children played on them. Children breathed the dust. Studies found that 34% of children in Peacher had elevated blood lead levels, causing developmental problems that don't show up immediately, but define the rest of a life. The Environmental Protection Agency added Piker to the Superfund priority list in 1983. The cleanup cost has exceeded $40 million, and the problem has not been solved. The ground beneath Peacher is so thoroughly undermined by 14,000 abandoned mine shafts that sinkholes open in the streets without warning. Actual sinkholes, swallowing actual streets, with essentially no notice. A 2006 government study found that 86% of the buildings in Peacher were structurally compromised by the undermined ground beneath them. In 2008, the federal government bought most residents out, and Peacher began the process of deincorporation. Then, weeks after the buyout offers were made, a tornado hit. A direct hit on a town that was already leaving. The tornado killed 6 people and destroyed what the lead hadn't. A handful of residents refused to leave. One man, a former mayor named Gary Linderman, stayed years past when everyone else had gone. As tending the remaining graves, monitoring the chat piles, bearing witness to a town that the mining companies used up and discarded. He died in 2016. After that, the population became a question mark. What's left of Peacher is an American wound that we'd prefer to look away from. The physical evidence of what extraction capitalism looks like when the resource is gone and the bill comes due. The chat piles are still there. The sinkhole's still open, the lead is still in the ground, and in the bones of everyone who grew up breathing that dust. And no amount of Superfund designation changes what was already done. Some things don't haunt you with ghosts, they haunt you with paperwork. Number 2, ONG's Hat, New Jersey. Population 0, or so they want you to believe. Before the internet was the internet, before Reddit, before ARG culture and viral mythology, a document started circulating in the late 1980s, passed hand-to-hand in physical photocopy, mailed to paranormal zine subscribers, shared in the early bulletin board systems that preceded the World Wide Web. It described a commune that had established itself in the pinelands of New Jersey in a ghost settlement called Ong's Hat, and had, through isolation, experimental physics, and a device called the egg, successfully made contact with and traveled to a parallel dimension. The document was called the Ong's Hat Incunabula. It described the commune in meticulous, specific, footnoted detail. It named researchers. It referenced real physics journals alongside fabricated ones. It described what the parallel dimension looked like, a pristine version of Earth, uninhabited, available. It said the commune had escaped into it. It said the government had come looking. It said you couldn't find them because they were already gone. The real Ong's Hat is a genuine location, a ghost settlement in Burlington County, New Jersey's Pine Barrens, named for a local hat maker named Ong. It was never more than a handful of buildings. Today nothing remains but a historical marker on a sandy pinelands road, surrounded by dwarf pines and the specific eerie flatness of the barrens. The creator of the Incunabula, a writer named Joseph Matheny, eventually acknowledged it as an interactive fiction project. Proto-ARG, a deliberate mythology. He said so clearly and repeatedly. The internet did not care. The myth has metastasized past authorial control. Forums still debate whether Matheny's denial is part of the mythology. People drive the sand roads of the Pine Barrens looking for evidence of the commune. The Pine Barrens themselves, 1.1 million acres of strange, flat, fog-laced forest in the middle of the most densely populated state in America, are weird enough to make any story feel possible. There is something about a place that generates a mythology so compelling that the truth about its origin doesn't kill it. Ong's Hat is not haunted. It is something stranger. It is believed. And whatever interdimensional commune may or may not have escaped into a pristine parallel Earth, the Pine Barrens are still there, still flat, still fog-laced, and still full of roads that don't go where you expected. Number 1, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Population, approximately 5. In 1962, a trash fire in a landfill that occupied an old strip mine pit on the edge of Centralia, Pennsylvania, ignited a coal seam running beneath the town. The fire spread through the mine tunnels. No one could put it out. 63 years later, it is still burning. The underground mine fire beneath Centralia has consumed approximately 400 acres of subsurface coal and is estimated to have enough fuel to continue burning for another 250 years. The ground temperature in some areas exceeds 900 degrees Fahrenheit below the surface. Sinkholes open with no warning. Carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide vent through fissures in the earth. In winter, the hillside smokes, white plumes rising from cracks in the pavement, from gaps in the ground, from places where the surface of the earth breathes fire. The state of Pennsylvania began relocating Centralia's residents in the 1980s. By 1990, it had condemned all property in the borough. In 1992, Pennsylvania seized the remaining properties through eminent domain. Most residents took the buyout and left. The population of 1,100 dropped to around 63 by 1990, then kept falling. The zip code was discontinued. The post office closed. The state demolished most of the homes, leaving behind a street grid of empty lots with fire hydrants still attached to nothing, staircases going up to foundations that no longer exist, suburban infrastructure for a suburb that burned away from the inside. 5 people live in Centralia today. They won a legal battle to remain on their properties until they die. Their houses stand on streets that otherwise exist only as grid lines through grass and rubble. They have addresses. They have mail delivery. They live in a condemned borough on top of a fire that will outlive everyone reading this by 2 centuries. Centralia became a cultural touchstone in 2006 when the Silent Hill movie, based on the video game directly inspired by Centralia, brought its imagery to a mass audience. The ashen streets, the smoke from the ground, the sense of a place being consumed from below by something that the surface world can't see or stop. Silent Hill is fiction. Centralia is not. The smoke is real. The temperature readings are real. The 5 remaining residents are real. People ask why anyone would stay in Centralia, and the answer is the same answer that echoes through every town on this entire list, from Cairo to Manawai to Adak, because it's home. Because leaving means the place wins. Because some people have a relationship with a piece of land that overrides every rational argument for departure, including, apparently, the argument that the land itself is on fire. Drive through Centralia today, and the streets are eerily clean, cleared, graded, maintained by the state as if waiting for something. On cold mornings, the smoke rises from the hillside in slow, unhurried columns. The street grid runs over the empty lots like chalk lines. The 5 remaining residents live in houses that are the last upright things on their blocks. And beneath all of it, 63 years into a fire that no one can stop, the coal burns and the earth breathes and something continues that no one has figured out how to end. That's not haunted. That's something worse. That's permanent. 10 towns, 1 underground fire. 46 witnesses who saw nothing. 1 woman with 5,000 books running an entire democracy by herself. A parallel dimension that might be full of commune members. And 5 people living on streets that smoke in the morning above a coal seam that'll be burning long after their grandchildren are gone. Here's what I keep coming back to. None of these places are fictional. Every zip code on this list is real. Every sinkhole, every wall of silence, every medium with red LED eyes glowing in the Florida humidity. Real. We live in a country large enough and strange enough to contain all of this simultaneously, tucked into its corners, hidden in its hollows, burning in its basements. The creepiest thing about America isn't any single town. It's that there are thousands more we didn't cover. Yes, towns with stories that haven't made it to the internet yet. Histories that the locals have agreed, wordlessly, not to tell. Places where the land remembers things the people have tried to forget. Drop in the comments. Which one of these would you actually visit? Centralia's the obvious dare, but I'm telling you, Ong's hat at 2 a.m. on a foggy Pine Barrens night is going to do something to your sense of reality that no burning mineshaft can match. Like this video if you made it to number 1. Subscribe because next time, we're doing the world's creepiest small towns, and at least 2 of them make Centralia look like a cozy problem. Share it with someone brave enough to handle the truth. Or cowardly enough that you want to watch them squirm. The fire's still burning. Sleep well.